Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, which drops on Thursday. Monday had a new one. It was a fun one. Check it out over at InsideTheBirds.com, wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple Pods, Google Play. Andrew DiCecco's here, our continuing coverage of the NFL divisions. We've been breaking down these divisions one by one. Today, we're going to take a look at the Nfc North. The Green Bay Packers, the Chicago Bears, Detroit Lions, and the Minnesota Vikings. And Andrew DiCecco is back. We've been doing a lot of this, and today we had some interesting news inside this division, so we'll continue and take a look at that in just a bit. Andrew, welcome back, man. How you been?
I'm doing all right, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, doing good, man. These have been fun. It's been good to hear your insight, getting a little bit of a deeper look at some of these teams, and I think this division has a lot of interesting teams in it. The NFC North, we'll start off with the Chicago Bears, and maybe one of the more interesting quarterback situations in all of football, where Andy Dalton, Justin Fields, and Nick Foles are all going to be on the field, and you wonder which one of those three. It sounds like Dalton. Do you buy that?
Yeah, I mean, try to figure that one out. Talk about a crowded quarterback room. If I had to guess right now, Mike, I would say that Andy Dalton's probably got the inside track to start. However, it's anyone's guess how that's going to shake out throughout the season. I don't know that Andy Dalton's a quarterback that you can count on for a full slate of games to play at a high level. I think eventually we've seen that him be a streaky quarterback in the past, so I don't know that he's going to be able to maintain that grasp at the top spot. So we know Nick Foles very well, of course. So I think it's a matter of time before Justin Fields gets his number called. And I mentioned this on your show before. I really like his upside and pro prospects, so I think he has a lot to offer.
Yeah, I know they like Dalton there, but you wonder if that's just lip service for as long as they possibly can until Fields actually pushes him off. Your prediction, who will start week one?
Oh, Andy Dalton. I think Andy Dalton's going to start week one, but like I said, he's someone that could sort of navigate them through the first handful of games until you start to see the streakiness, right? You're going to see the good and the bad of Andy Dalton. I think eventually they're just going to be a middling team. So they're going to say, well, you know what, let's put the kid in and see what we got in Justin Fields. And Justin Fields is going to bring so much more of a dynamic presence to the offense, really be able to utilize the Allen Robinsons, the Darnell Mooneys, the Marquise Goodwin, who can be a decent deep threat if he actually does make the team, David Montgomery, just a more well-rounded offensive attack, which under Mitch Trubisky, it really hasn't been much of anything on offense.
Running back David Montgomery, Tariq Cohen's a nice weapon there. Robinson is one of the better receivers in football. This is a team that I guess has a little bit of offensive talent. When you think Bears, a lot of times you don't think of these great offensive weapons, but Robinson certainly would be in that mix. How do you see the weapons here on the Bears?
You know, it's funny. I had this conversation with my friend Ron today just about the Chicago Bears running back situation. David Montgomery, and of course what happened to Cam Akers, which will be Darrell Henderson being the starter there. And the way I sort of had that balanced out for the draft, I actually had Josh Jacobs, then it was David Montgomery, then I had Darrell Henderson, and then I had Miles Sanders. I think David Montgomery is a really well-rounded running back that has been criminally misutilized there in that Chicago offense. I think he can bring so much more to the table than how he's being sort of deployed there. I think he can bring a lot as a pass catcher and as a runner, both inside and outside the tackles. Then, of course, you have Tariq Cohen there, who's a good change-up guy, can catch the football, very slippery and elusive in the open field. Khalil Herbert's a player that they drafted in the 6th round out of Virginia Tech, who I really liked. He was a sort of a day 3 guy that I mentioned for the Eagles. Should they look at running backs, him and Elijah Mitchell were two the day 3 guys that I like. They also have C.J. Marable, an undrafted free agent from Coastal Carolina, who has a decent shot to make the team. So they have a number of running backs there that they can utilize in different types of roles. So I really like what they've done there. I mentioned Allen Robinson. Darnell Mooney to me is one of the more underrated deep threats. This just is going to be his second season, a 5th-round pick out of Tulane. I think he's going to be a breakout star this year and really emerge as a deep threat. So they have a vertical dimension with him. And then Cole Kmet, the tight end, I think he's another guy that is going to be someone that can sort of stretch the field and provide a security blanket for whatever quarterback's there. Andy Dalton will be there in the early goings, I believe. And Jesper Horsted's a player who's very interesting. He backs him up. He was a wide receiver for Princeton, a prolific wide receiver for Princeton. I saw him at the East-West Shrine Bowl, really good route runner. But I mentioned to someone, I said, you know what? I don't know if he has the speed to be a receiver at the next level, but I could see him becoming a tight end. Sure enough, he sort of found his niche there at the NFL level as a tight end, and he is another good receiver there. And so they have a good dynamic tight end duo there.
Yeah, Jimmy Graham there as well. So a veteran player. So interesting offense there for the Chicago Bears. Andrew DiCecco, their defense, it's the Bears. They're always a defensive-minded team. We always think defense. Hicks, Khalil Mack, Roquan Smith, Trevathan, is this Eddie Jackson, Desmond Trufant. Is this still a good Bears defense?
Yeah, I think so. You mentioned Akeem Hicks. He's a dominating, very stout defensive tackle at that to sort of anchor that line there. Khalil Mack, of course. Roquan Smith, I think, is he was a first-round pick in 2018, but I still think, despite his high pedigree, people don't really mention him as far as the more premier linebackers in football. And I really do think that he should be in that conversation because he's such a against both the run and the pass, and it's a tackling machine. Really like what he can do there. Danny Trevathan's a tough, hard-nosed football player, just a steady guy. I remember him from his days with the Denver Broncos. I really thought that he was going to be one of those emerging type of players, but he's been a steady player throughout his career. Then when you look at, you got Desmond Trufant there. You have Tayshaun Gibson, who was a promising safety at one point for, I believe, the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's bounced around a little bit, but he'll be playing opposite Eddie Jackson, another one of my favorite safeties in the National Football League. And then Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson is a player who he did ITB TV before the last draft, and I thought that there was an outside shot that he ended up in Philadelphia, given his sort of his build, and I thought that he had a lot of upside. He was a player that sort of slipped in the draft due to injury concerns in college, but he's really emerged as one of the better young cornerbacks in football. So I love what they've done there.
We're talking with Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Let's go over to the Detroit Lions. A lot of people think this could be the worst team in football. Jared Goff is the new QB in Detroit, and you look around this roster and you wonder, are they going to put points up with Perryman and Williams and Hopkinson and DeAndre Swift? What kind of offense do we anticipate Jared Goff triggering this year?
Well, it's going to be a very sporadic offense. I don't know that they're going to be able to get much of anything going, even with Jared Goff there. Obviously, I think Matthew Stafford's a better quarterback, but adding Jared Goff, you should be able to still manufacture some offense. However, I don't know if they're going to be able to do so. They're going to have to lean on their running game with DeAndre Swift as a player who's going to take on more carries. Of course, Kerryon Johnson's no longer there. Jamal Williams is a bigger back. We saw what he was able to do in Green Bay when he got some extensive looks. I think that he has more to offer than what he was able to show in Green Bay because, of course, Aaron Jones was there. Then when you look at the tight end situation, I think T.J. Hawkinson's really going to have to be a key player here because you want to see him take the next step. This is going to be his third season in the NFL. He's going to have to be someone that Jared Goff leans on. Remember, Jared Goff has not historically leaned on either of his tight ends, or any of his tight ends, I should say. With the Rams, I thought that there's a chance that Tyler Higbee was going to emerge. That never quite happened. He seems to really key in on a lot of his receivers, and that's why I think a player like a Khalif Raymond, who was with the Tennessee Titans, he's a slot receiver. Tyrell Williams has a chance to be a good deep threat for them, and Brashad Perriman's there coming over from the Jets. I think that, and Amon St. Brown is a player who was a fourth-round pick out of USC, sort of in the mold of a Golden Tate, one of those stockier, do-it-all gadget type of players, but is really physical after the catch, can manufacture yards that way. I think he's going to be a player that really becomes a focal point for Jared Goff as someone who can take dump-offs and move the chains in that way. So they have some guys. I just don't know if they're going to be consistent enough to generate offense with regularity.
All right, Detroit, we all agree it's one of the teams that is young and struggling, and they're changing things over. Like their, the new head coach there, Dan Campbell, seems to be getting some good grades. But defense is another interesting situation. Michael Brockers up front, Jamie Collins at linebacker, Trey Flowers, Okuda, who they drafted, a year ago. But overall, it seems like Detroit could struggle defensively as well.
Yeah, they have Aleem McNeil, the defensive tackle they took in the third round. A lot of Eagles fans, he had the higher pedigree, and they ended up going with Milton Williams. I think Milton Williams is a better fit in Philadelphia, by the way, but he's there as a third-round pick. Michael Brockers is there. John Pennicini was a sixth-round pick last year, a fantastic day 3 value pick. He plays with great leverage. He's a strong guy. He played at Utah. I think he offers a little bit of upside in the interior there. They also have, we said Jamie Collins, of course. Alex Anzalone's there, came over from the Saints. And Amani Oruwariye from Penn State, he's there at corner. He is a grabby player who doesn't necessarily rely on technique, and he tends to panic a little bit, and he's not necessarily the most fleet-footed corner. So he's a grabby guy, but he has a lot of raw ability. I just don't think that he's going to be a consistent enough player. I think he's sort of going to be teams are going to take advantage of his aggressiveness on the outside. And Okuda's there, of course. So, I mean, they have a couple of pieces to work with there, just not enough talent on either side of the ball to really make any headway in that division.
All right, you look at the Detroit Lions, one of the worst teams possibly in football. You go over to Green Bay, which last year was one of the best teams in football, but you got to start at the quarterback position. We don't really have an answer. What's going to happen here?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be make or break for this entire division, what happens at the quarterback spot in Green Bay. However, I do think that Aaron Rodgers is going to be present and accounted for this season and lead that Green Bay offense. I love what they have. I love the pieces that they have there. You look at the running back situation. We mentioned Aaron Jones, and of course, they have A.J. Dillon from Boston College, who really is going to take over that Jamal Williams role as between the tackles grinder and then factoring in the goal line situations. Josiah DeGuara was a tight end, an H-back type player out of Cincinnati in the draft last season that I really like for Philadelphia. Philadelphia expressed a little bit of interest in him pre-draft. He's someone that I think is going to be more involved in the offense. Mercedes Lewis is there. Mercedes Lewis feels like he's been around forever, but he's still going to be there. So you have a couple of guys that are going to make some plays over the middle of the field, and DeGuara and Mercedes Lewis. And they drafted Amari Rogers from Clemson. He's going to be a slot receiver, and he's going to provide an adequate complementary piece to both Devontae Adams and Allen Lazard. Devontae Adams obviously is one of the most gifted receivers in football, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling is more of not a volume receiver, but he's someone that plays well in spurts, and I think that he is going to be best served as a fourth or fifth receiver on that receiving core. And so they do have a lot of depth there that I like.
Yeah, obviously, it's funny. We mentioned the weapons. Devontae Adams was recently ranked as the number 1 wide receiver in football on that ESPN.com survey of scouts, executive players. So they got a great weapon there. Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, nice little 1-2 punch there. Valdez-Scantling has been a nice find for them. Equimonius St. Brown has been a nice find for them. Their offensive line is one of the stronger ones in football.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention David Bakhtiari, the left tackle, and, of course, John Runyon, the left guard. He was a player, another late-round guy who I really liked, saw him at the Shrine Bowl. He's a versatile, tough player, much like his father, and he really sort of settled into a role there in Green Bay. He's a scrappy guy, sort of custom fit for that offensive line and that environment. That tough, cold Green Bay where they want to ground and pound. I like the fit there. And Elton Jenkins, the center, is another good young player as well. So they're a very well-rounded offense with a lot of firepower.
Andrew, they scored the most points in football last year. And in their division, they gave up the least amount of points in the NFC North. So when you look at this defense, it doesn't have like that jump off the page name at you. There's some good names here. It doesn't have that all-pro type of guy. But this is a very steady defense. Yeah,
there's a lot of cohesiveness, just a lot of solid, fundamentally sound football players that play very well collectively as a unit. And that's what great teams have. And a lot of chemistry there. When you look at Kenny Clark is a very underrated nose tackle. He was the first-round pick, I believe, in 2016. Rashawn Gary was somebody who they drafted, their outside linebacker. He was a defensive end at Michigan, their first-round pick in 2019. Was not particularly high on him coming out of the draft. I thought he had a sporadic motor, and I thought that there were certain opportunities of his game that he could have refined. I didn't necessarily see a fit in the first round for him, but he's there. He's starting to turn the corner and become the player that they envisioned him when they came out in the draft. And Zadarius Smith sort of emerged out of nowhere a couple of years ago. I love what he can bring as a pass rusher. And then when you look at the secondary, Jair Alexander is my favorite cornerback in football, right up there with Tre'Davious White from Buffalo. I like what he can bring he's not necessarily the biggest guy, but he's fearless. He's tough. He'll get in your face. He can cover any type of receiver that you want. Great ball skills, can attack the catch point, or affect the catch point, I should say, and just does not back down from a challenge. Shannon Sullivan is probably one of the best nickel corners in football, former Eagle, by the way. And Darnell Savage is one of the better young safeties in football to pair with Adrian Amos. So I love their secondary.
Good stuff from Andrew here, breaking down Green Bay. Now, the other team in the division is Minnesota. I find this team to be interesting. I thought they were a major disappointment last year. Their defense was a problem. Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, Thielen, Justin Jefferson. Right there, you've got a great core of offensive weapons. And then their offensive line has been a big problem over the years. So how is Minnesota looking offensively in 2021?
Well, you're right. Minnesota's offensive line has been up there with the Giants, the Bengals, the Cardinals. They're just teams that perennially have very porous offensive lines historically, and they sort of added some young pieces over the past couple of years. In 2020, they added Ezra Cleveland, the left guard, in the second round from Boise State, and they drafted Tristan Darrisaw, the tackle from Virginia Tech, in the first round this year. So that left side solidified. However, it's the right side is going to give them problems this season. They're still a work in progress in that area, but they do have some young players to develop. I love the receiving core with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. They're not necessarily burners, but they're terrific route runners, and they know how to get open. They have a great feel for finding the soft spots in zone. They attack the football in the air, and they're just the type of receivers that Kirk Cousins, the player of a Kirk Cousins caliber, is going to have to lean on, because he's not someone that is a consistent enough passer to find guys deep or anything like that. He's going to look to those guys over the middle to make these catches and things like that. That's just sort of his game. He doesn't have the arm strength to get it down the field consistently. They drafted Amir Smith-Marset. He was a raw but talented, speedy receiver out of Iowa. I think he's going to factor in as a kick returner for them. He was a tremendous return man in the Big Ten last year. So, I mean, and then having even gotten to their running backs, Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison might be the best 1-2 punch in the NFL.
Yeah, Cook to me is getting there to the point where, he's him and Kamara, two of the most dynamic players at that position in the league. Thielen's so steady. That's a fun offense, but the line has let them down. We'll see if they're better. Defensively, though, is where they were really let down, I thought, last year. And it came up front because they've had some really good players in the back half. Now, we've seen two of those players come to Philadelphia, Eric Wilson being one of them, Anthony Harris. Harris was a guy who was pretty good in 2019, was not as good last year, but did a lot of that have to do with the problems they had up front?
Yeah, and you and I talked about that. I think that's exactly what happened, but Minnesota really addressed the defensive line, added some girth there in the middle with Michael Pierce and Dalvin Tomlinson. Right in the middle of that defensive line, they're going to be a force against the run and push the pocket and get the quarterback off his spot. Then Danielle Hunter's there, of course, Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks. Then on the back end, you have Patrick Peterson, who is certainly not the Patrick Peterson of old, but he should still lock up some of the top receivers and provide some coverage there. Harrison Smith and Xavier Woods are there. Xavier Woods came over from Dallas. He's been a very inconsistent up and down player, but he's going to provide some, he's an adequate replacement for Anthony Harris. So it's not a tremendous downgrade. Gladney's the right corner there. He's going to have to really take a step in his development. He's a very lean-bodied and finesse type of corner that really is going to struggle with some bigger-bodied receivers if he doesn't develop his play strength. But I do think he has some tools worth developing. Of course, he went to TCU. He was a teammate of Jalen Reagor. And then in nickel, they also have another young corner they drafted in the third round last season in Cameron Dantzler. who has really surprised me. I think he's developed. He's come along quite a bit in just one season. So,
all right,
I do like what they have there.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting team. Minnesota should be interesting to see how this unfolds for them. I thought they were one of the more disappointing. Them and Philadelphia, I guess, were two of the most disappointing teams in the league last year. Philadelphia had a lot of injury issues. Minnesota just had a lot of disappointing outputs, and they had some injuries as well, but we'll see. I think Minnesota will be interesting. So in the end, this is a tough division to kind of chronicle. I guess you could do your NFC North with Aaron Rodgers and without Aaron Rodgers.
Well, why don't we start with Rodgers? The Green Bay Packers would be the class of that division. Then I think you have to look at the Minnesota Vikings because I do like what they have from an offensive skill set, and they do have some. We just outlined some of the pieces that they have there on defense. Then I want to go with the Chicago Bears, and solely because, they have a stout defense, but their quarterback situation is in a state of flux right now. You don't necessarily know what way they're going to lean, and even if they do go to Justin Fields, it's far from certainty that he's going to step right in and be set the world on fire. So. And then to round things out, you got to go with the Detroit Lions. They're just a mess. And like you said, they could very well be the worst team in football.
All right, there you go. Andrew DiCecco breaking down the NFC North. Great stuff. Football at 4. And our final division preview happens on Friday. And then on Tuesday, Andrew will be here for the kickoff of Eagles training camp. That's when it begins. Tuesday's edition of Football at 4 is the official start of Eagles training camp, and we have it covered here on the Sports Bash Live. Check out InsideTheBirds.com as well, as Andrew and Jeff have been going back and forth on a variety of topics to get you ready for Eagles training camp. And, of course, tomorrow Adam Kaplan is here. Andrew's back Friday, Jeff on Monday, and we've got you covered for Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. All right, Andrew, great stuff, man.
Yeah, man. Have a good one.
You do the same. These division previews have been fun. We'll do the NFC East on Friday's edition with Andrew DiCecco.